if there was something interesting, and I've been putting them all up on the web, so so others can look and see.
Recording is on.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for making the time, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this difficult topic. We have some challenges in our community around tower climbing. It's pretty central to what we do, many of us, and it's something that we ought to be doing safely. Let me jump right into presenting. So let's see here. Share a screen. Okay, you need to whoever's a host needs to give me permission.
Yep. Here we go. I'm going to make you the host.
Okay, that works. There we go. Okay, share sound. And share this. Okay. Let me know if you see an intro screen.
We do.
You do?
I see
Okay,
the upper
great.
left corner of an intro screen.
What's that?
I see the upper left corner of an intro screen.
Really?
The rest of
others
us
see the
do
whole thing?
see a full black
I see a full
title
screen.
page.
I see a full one.
Yeah,
I see a
I
full.
do as well.
Okay,
It's getting across the Atlantic.
maybe that's it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope everybody has the whole thing. Okay. It was in 2018, late 2018, that I became interested in this topic. I'm going to show you the toughest slides that we need to look at right up front. These are 4 people who lost their lives to tower climbing in a pretty short time period. Ken Waddell doesn't have a call sign. He was a tower climber, a professional tower climber who was helping out a ham radio friend and lost his life in the process. I actually had only heard about Paul Bittner, W0AIH, in October of 2018. And then about 9 months later, in July of 2019, a guy I knew a little bit, Joe K1JGA, lost his life while he was helping a friend take the tower down before the friend was planning to move south from New Hampshire. As I started to dig into what was going on here, I found out about these 2 other gentlemen, Ken and Lee. And it became really clear to me that we have an issue that we need to address as a community. Since then, I hate to tell you this, but this is not the end of the story. 4 more. And look at the dates at the bottom of the page here. 3 in the last month and a half. And Richard on the left, Rich Chris, was somebody that I did not become aware of until fairly recently, but he was also doing the work and suffered his fatal injury during the time of that previous year. Okay, so I hope nobody's going to disagree with me when we look at this kind of number: 8 fatal ham radio tower accidents in 24 months. It's something that we really need to pay some attention to, a lot of attention, in my view. Back in 2018, I was asked to give a talk. I guess, I'm sorry, was it 2018, 2019? After the K1JGA incident, I was asked to give a talk on this topic at the New England Division convention. And in the process of doing that, I tried to think a little bit about how to go about this in a way that might really add some new value I didn't want to just retread old topics, things that others had covered before. So I wanted to first understand whether we had a problem. And then if we haven't indeed really have a problem here based on the numbers, to look into it and try to use some data analytics to figure out what's at the root of this. And then finally, of course, if there was some, if we could identify some systemic problems, is there a way that we can address those problems? So that's what the flow of this presentation is. Many of you are familiar with OSHA and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics keeps track of incidents in the workplace. Well, they keep track of everything about the workplace: number of workers, how much people get paid, where do they live in the country, that kind of thing. But they also keep track of, along with OSHA, injuries and fatal injuries that occur in each of many different occupations. It turns out that across all occupations, they track everything, and what they do is they normalize the number of fatalities to a per 100,000 workers kind of number. So that one occupation can be compared to another. And so I was looking to this data to try to understand whether the level of fatalities that we were seeing in the amateur radio community is high or low compared to occupations that one might consider to be risky. So the first thing to note is that across all occupations annually, the number of fatalities per 100,000 workers is this. It's 3.6. So that includes any kind of fatality that happened on the job. It doesn't include commuting to work. That kind of fatality doesn't count. But this is the number. And of course, this merges together occupations that one would consider very risk-free and others that are very risky. So I took one occupation for which data was available and compared it to amateur radio tower climbing. The occupation that I used was professional cellular tower climbing. Seemed like a good one. And here's what we end up with. Commercial tower climbing, there was some good data on this, about 10 fatalities per year amongst about 5,000 full-time equivalent workers. When you run those numbers, you end up with this number of about 200 deaths per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers per year. Of course, we're not talking about 200 lives lost because the number of workers across the country is much smaller than 100,000. But in order to do that normalization, we multiply essentially by 20 to get to 100,000. Okay. So with some additional research, and I can dive into this later if you want, but we did some estimates as to how much tower climbing work is being done in the amateur radio community, and we assumed that the number of workers would be, as if we took all of our part-time workers and combined them into full-time equivalents, we get about 500 full-time equivalent climbers. Okay. And we took the number that I had. I didn't use the recent number, the number of the 4 for this year, but 4 for last year, 4 lives lost. And that comes out to almost 900 deaths per 100,000 full-time equivalent ham radio tower climbers. So we're talking about a really, very significantly greater risk of fatal incidents in the amateur radio tower climbing community than in the professional tower climbing community. So that's certainly cause for concern. But I didn't want to just go with one comparison. I wanted to take a look at another. So we took a look at another avocation that many consider to be risky. We looked at skydiving. And in the skydiving community, there's an organization called the U.S. Parachute Association. They track all the statistics around skydiving for the U.S. In 2018, the number of jumps was 3.3 million. and there were 13 recorded lives lost um, in the course of doing those jumps. If you do some division here, and we just look at the number of jumps divided by the number of lives lost, it's 250,000 to 1. Okay, so now let's do something similar in the amateur radio world. We took there was a number that we did that I used. I didn't go over in the previous slide. It was about the amount of tower climbing per tower per year, that kind of thing. For this analysis, for this skydiving analysis, we assumed that every tower in the U.S., every amateur radio tower in the U.S. Received service or had 4 climbs per year for every tower in the U.S. And that comes out to 152,000 climbs per year. And again, if we do that same division, 152,000 divided by 4, you get 38,000. 38,000 to 1. Look at the difference in the frequency at which a fatality occurs in terms of dives in the skydiving world versus climbs in the amateur radio world. So this again tells us, I think, that we have a pretty serious problem. We were more than 4 times more likely to have a fatal injury in the compared to commercial tower climbing, and 7 times more likely to have a fatal incident compared to skydiving. Conclusion: we have a problem. I think we could do more in this area in terms of looking at other types of activities, but I think it's pretty clear we have a problem. Let me take a break here. Anybody want to ask a question or comment on those stats? I could give you a lot more information. We used a very interesting methodology to determine or estimate the number of amateur radio towers in the U.S. That was an important part of the problem, and some other things. But I'd love to hear anybody's comments.
Question.
Sure. Who is it?
This is Tom, WA7 TVP. Of our amateur brothers that lost their lives, how many of those were falls from the tower versus a tower collapse? Do you know?
I do. We're going to talk about it very soon. Do you mind? Because I have slides on that topic.
Nope, no problem.
Specifically.
Question.
Yes. Yep.
This is Ralph, KC7QXD. I'm seeing your numbers. You've said four climbs per tower per year. If you run that down to maybe 2 climbs per tower per year, your numbers get even worse.
That's right. Oh yeah. The numbers get worse as the amount of climbing we assume or model decreases. Correct. It's not easy to do. I mean, for me, I climb my tower twice a week. And so there are a lot of very active towers. But and again, the research that we did to determine the number of towers also gave us some indication of how active those towers probably were in terms of need for maintenance or the frequency of maintenance. And what you see across the country is thousands and thousands of towers that probably aren't climbed more than once every 5 or 8 or 10 years,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so there's a small, I'm sure we could come up with a bell-shaped curve that would show a peak of towers like mine that are climbed very frequently, because that's the part of the hobby that I enjoy the most, down to a long tail of tower climbing, towers that have very, very infrequent climbs.
Question?
Yes.
Howard, WA1ECM. So that begs the question, have more folk died on less frequently climbed towers?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that yet. Maybe we can talk about it when we look at some of the data. That's a good question. Okay. Let's go. Let's continue. Okay. So the next part of the analysis is to dig into some data and take a look at what's really going on here. Well, here's some data. This is the list of fatalities since the year 2000, the first one being in 2003. And there are 18. By the way, I'm sorry, this is not exactly correct. This is 18 fatal ham radio tower incidents. There's one incident that was in 2009, which took 3 lives. So we have 18, and in terms of fatalities themselves, it's roughly 1 a year. Okay. And there's some other things about this data that we could talk about, but I've tried to capture just on one page when, who, their age, the location, and a phrase on what the story was. And you will see, as you suggested, that it is pretty heavily split between those two things, either riding a tower down or free falling off a tower. There are a couple other incidents as well. Okay, this is a chart showing the trend, and I don't think anybody should like the trend here. Okay, in 2009, you see there were 3. That was also the year that had the 3 lives lost in a single incident. And this is incidents, not lives. So in fact, the lives lost in 2009 was 5. Okay. Okay. There's an error here. I'm sorry. There's an error here. This headline is supposed to say fatal incidents, number of fatal incidents by year. I have another chart which is actually hidden right now, which I can unhide, which shows what time of year these things all happened. And it turns out that right now, let me just do that. Let me find that chart. And let me show you that. We are in the height of the deadly tower climbing season. So all of those incidents occurred when the weather was good and we were out climbing our towers. Okay, with the exception of this one in January. But this one happened in the south and I think the weather was good. Okay, let's go back, and I want to add to this. So we talked about this, the fatalities. We're talking about 18 fatal incidents, 21 fatalities over a 20-year period. One might ask the question, well, that's not a huge number. We have 38,000 towers and many, many, many tower climbers. Is this, does that justify looking into this? And the answer to that is partly this slide. Fatality rates are a proxy for injuries. So not only are we losing people to fatal incidents, but there are also many, many injuries that occur in the course of working on towers. And I believe that the things that we see and the root causes that we see in the fatalities, which are well documented, will teach us an awful lot about what we do wrong and can help us prevent injuries as well as fatal injuries. Just as a way of, to give that some support, that comment some support, OSHA reports 183 injuries for every fatal fall. So this is just fall-related injuries. And there is there are watchdog groups that actually look at what OSHA is reporting and do their own additional supplemental research, and they claim that 65 to 80% of injuries go unreported. So even though there's a requirement by OSHA to report, there is a strong belief that many injuries do not go unreported. So this could be 250, 300 to 1 injuries per fatality. I don't know what the ratio is in our community, but we do know of friends who have had serious injuries or even not so serious injuries or had near misses. And many of those things could probably have been prevented with some knowledge that we could gain, and what we'll talk about as we go through the data here. Okay. To add to that, this is this is pretty recent now. There was some very well documented, very serious injuries that have happened over the years. One of them, again, was just recent in August. And to add to the statistical validity, the database here, I've added these injuries into the statistics, so we have a few more numbers to work with. Okay. I am sure that there are many more than these, and we'll be working to add to the database. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's our calendar month thing. Okay. Let me answer that previous question. This, by the way, this does not include the, let's see, this 7 to 18. This doesn't include the 3 most recent fatalities, unfortunately. But what you see here in red is fell with the tower. The tower collapsed with the climber on the tower. The yellow is the other major category, which is free fall. That's falling off the tower when you're not attached in some way. And then there are a couple of other types of incidents that have occurred. There was an electrocution and injured by the tower. Something broke or let loose and caused an injury on the tower that didn't result in an actual fall, but it was a fatality on the tower. Let me tell you what happens with the new data from the last month and a half. The 7 goes to 10, and the 10 goes to 11. So it becomes almost an even split between those 2 major ones. All right. Now let's look at what was going on with these towers, or what kinds of incidents happened during different types of tower work. That's a better way to say it. During installation or removal of the tower itself, look at this. 1 free fall and the other 90% were falling with the tower. Okay. So the tower collapsed. And in between, when the tower was up and people were doing maintenance work on a tower, there were 2 types of incidents. Again, but the majority were free fall off the tower, and only 1 was injured by the tower. There were no cases of the tower collapsing while somebody was on the tower doing any form of maintenance work. Maintenance work could be putting up or taking down an antenna, or repairing feed lines, or any number of other things. Okay. So you should be scratching your chin like this and thinking, okay, I think I know what's going on here. Let's look at the types of towers involved. Unfortunately, I did not have complete data from all of the incidents. There were 3 in the data set that I could not really get much information on what the tower was. But the majority, as you can see, almost 3/4 were guide towers, guide structures. There were a couple of crank-ups, 1 or 2 crank-ups or self-supporting towers that had incidents. Now, when we start to look at what happened, and this is basically looking at each of the incidents individually and kind of looking for a root cause. When you fall with a tower, when the tower collapses with one on it, it's generally because it was a tower that was in an unsafe state for climbing. And we can add to this, I need to add the word guide tower, that it's an unsafe guide tower, not safe for climbing. Falling off a tower, it's independent of what type of tower, but what's common is either inadequate personal protection equipment, meaning the climbing belts and harnesses and lanyards and such, or not using them correctly. We have cases of both. And then finally, there's sort of a miscellaneous bucket that I call unsafe maneuvers. And that's where people took on some sort of a challenge or did something that was they were really unprepared for, and the consequences were quite severe. Okay, generally that happens when you don't know what you're doing, or when you don't have the people or the tools to get the job done. All right. Now if we take all of the incidents and back into the root causes, the number one root cause in this data, this is before we had the recent data, was climbing an unsafe guide tower, and a second was the 7 here in the personal protection equipment or free climbing. Today, with the new data, they're almost equal. Okay, and then there were a few in that unsafe maneuvers category. So what's important, really important to note, is that the 2 points that were made earlier are the 2 things that are putting us at risk. One is climbing an unsafe guide tower, and second is climbing using the wrong stuff, or climbing, not using proper technique or equipment. When you look at this data set, it appears that all of those incidents of fatalities occurring could have been prevented. That's 85%, so not including the unsafe maneuvers ones. But if we can fix these 2 problems, we can cure a huge portion of this general problem that we have. Okay. Let me take a break here on the statistics. We're going to talk about each of these 2 problems in a second. Any questions or comments?
Lots of head slapping, no other comments.
What's that?
I have lots of head slapping because
Oh.
taking down a guide tower is not hard, but it requires extra guys.
Hey. Yes, it does.
Been there, done that.
Right. Okay. All right. But, and a lot of us know that, but let's talk about that. A guide tower must be truly safe to climb all the time. This is the key. All the time, even when it's being installed or removed. There's an intuition that we have, which is, oh, I've got the first 3 sections up. I'll quickly run up the tower and attach the guy wire, the first permanent set of guys, and everything will be fine. That little bolt that's holding it on to the pier pin will be fine. Well, it's not. And when we're taking down a tower, or when we're well, we're going to get to this, but ropes, just using soft ropes is often not going to be good enough. And there are lots of examples of people who have had some terrible things happen when they were trying to use simple ropes to hold up, to guy a tower. So when climbing the tower, it needs to be properly guided, always. And what does properly guide mean? Even when it's temporary, it does not mean that the guiding can be poor, or that low quality, or just okay. What that means is you need a guy use guy anchors that are correct. You want to use wire rope, real stiff, strong, static lines that can be tensioned right up to the normal tension that should be on the guy, as if you were going to leave it there for the next 10 years. You want a guy at the proper spacing, vertical spacing, or better, or even more conservative. And that last point about tension. Before you get on the tower, you should be confident, even during this removal or construction of a new tower, that the tower feels like, or is supported in a way that could be left there for the long term. Okay, so last summer we did a tower takedown for a guy local here, and when I took this picture, we had taken the tower down from about 100 feet down to this last 40 feet or so, and I think it was about 43, 45 feet here. There were 4 complete sections, A, B, C, and D, and then the bottom section was embedded in a concrete base. So what did we do? First of all, we checked the guy anchors. I used a piece of rebar or something. We pounded rebar into the ground until we hit the concrete dead man. What else did we? We inspected the base as best we could. So we did the best we could to try to be sure that the tower seemed to be stable and the installation was okay. It was easy to tell. We had a loose guy tension gauge, and we were able to determine that the guys were tensioned to full, standard production tension. So then we started to take this thing down the rest of the way. There was this one set of guys that's attached here and tensioned up was the lowest permanent set of guys. Now this is where people might have made the fatal mistake. One could go up here and remove these guys and drop them to the ground and trust the base to keep this thing up and then disassemble this tower section by section. That has been known to fail in too many occurrences that we could talk about. So what we did was we took a set of the upper guys that had already been taken down and we attached one set here just below this section B, and we attached another set. I'm sorry, and then we moved this permanent set down below here. So now you've got two sets of guys, both of them tensioned up to full tension and going out to the original guy anchors. And we pull off sections A and B. So those are down. Next thing we do is remove these temporary guys that we had set here. And then we got off the tower completely, and we released this lower set of temporary guys at the anchors. Okay, so the guy wires were just hanging here, just the same way that these other guys were hanging at this point. Anyways, and what did we do? We came to the base, and remember, since this is just embedded in concrete, we cut the legs and we tipped the thing over. So we just tipped over 20 feet of tower. By the way, you can sort of see it in here. One of the reasons we did it that way was because inside the tower here was a mast. There was a 20-foot mast inside the tower, so it would have been difficult to remove this section C from D because the mast was going all the way up to here someplace. Okay, all right. So this we believed was a real safe way to remove a tower. If we were doing this in the opposite order to install the tower, what would we have done? Well, we would have put temporary guys at maybe 10 feet, right on the first section, and then proceeded to add one or two more sections, and then put another set of guys up. Okay. All right, what's next? All right. In the aftermath of some of these accidents, it has become known that the base of the guide tower was structurally unsound. Sometimes that means there was corrosion, or it means there was some kind of a problem with a weld or something else. My message here is that you don't want to trust the base of a guide tower for anything, ever. You just don't do it. You don't know how it was built, particularly when you're taking it down. But even when you're putting it up, there's no reason to. Because you have available to you guys, you want to use the guys. Guide towers are designed to be held up by guy wires, not by their base. I can go a little bit on a tangent here. In the Roan Tower book, you will see a design for a freestanding 30 or 40 foot Roan 25 tower. And the wind load that it is spec'd for is a tiny little whip antenna or something. It's a little tiny antenna at the top. If you imagine yourself up at the top of that tower, no guys, and you're leaning back with your belt on, and you're putting bending moment on the base of the tower just from your own weight, you are probably exceeding that wind load spec that design was meant for just by being on the tower and working on it. So my view is there are no guide tower designs that you should rely on in which the base will support you on the tower. Okay, so here are some pictures. This was a very unfortunate incident. This is a picture of the site at which one of the gentlemen who lost his life went down with the tower. You can see that the base was a pier pin type base, or just a plate, and he had ropes or something else, and he was only at 10 or 15 feet and came down with the tower and lost his life. Here's one of those bases where, after excavation around the base, this tremendous corrosion was found. Here's one, to me, I don't know what this is exactly. It doesn't look factory to me, so I don't know what we got here. I wouldn't trust this base.
No.
That's
Here's a
tipper
base.
tower.
What's that?
That was the tilting tower.
It is. It is. I see a plate here. I don't know
we
how the
actually
plate
just
is
took one of those
attached to the ground. Do you?
There's actually 4 bolts that are supposed to be through that plate into a concrete block.
I think maybe what's
you
going
can
on
see
here is
a
the
bolt hole
the verticals that the bolt is going through that are welded to the tower leg. Maybe those are going down into the concrete below. I'm not sure.
They're welded onto the plate, and the plate is bolted onto the concrete normally. We just took one very similar to that down a few months ago,
Okay. Okay.
but that one's also in very poor condition.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's one with, look at these little pegs in the corners. This is the base of that one that we took down. I didn't understand why this sort of triangle concrete structure existed. I did not understand this. So it didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. We did, pound on the legs a bit to see if they felt okay, but we were confident that if we put full tension steel guys on this tower, that we were going to be okay taking it down. This was some Roan 45. So I think you get the point. So that's the topic of climbing an unsafe guide tower. If we just use temporary guides correctly, in all the cases when we should, I think that most of those incidents that occurred in that manner would have been eliminated. So the second category, the second big one, is this personal protection equipment. The term in the industry is free climbing. If you're not attached to the tower, then you're free climbing. Those of us who are old enough to remember before this safety stuff became in vogue, remember climbing ham towers. I did it, and most of my friends did it, and we thought nothing of it. Generally, what it meant was actually being willing to climb up a tower 20, 30, 40 feet with no climbing equipment at all, no personal protection equipment. We eventually started to use other equipment. Okay, so let's keep going. What is free climbing? The OSHA definition, again, I mentioned this before, is not being attached 100% of the time. There are specs on this. OSHA has some specs and requirements. ANSI is called American National Standards Institute, and they produce actually a better set of best practices and standards, more detailed than OSHA, and they are generally voluntarily adopted by most of the industry. Most industry does. OSHA has, it's sort of a superset of the OSHA stuff. Here are some pictures of hams doing what I believe to be free climbing. It's not always the case, but probably, or I'm not 100% sure in every case. This guy doesn't look like he has any sort of lanyards attaching to him to the tower. Here's another guy who appears to have scrambled up the side of a tower, a crank up, to deliver or to untangle the feed line or something, but he's not attached at all. This looks like a field day operation. And we have this fellow at the top of what looks like another crank up kind of thing, which is a guide with some ropes. They don't look like they're very tight. They could be tied at the anchor points to, who knows, tent pegs? I don't know. And he's up at the top swinging around this little lanyard getting ready to attach it. And I don't think anybody on the ground is looking up at him. And here's another picture that it looks very, very similar. This guy looks like he's wearing some good stuff. He's got a fancy full body harness on. He's got a positioning lanyard going around the tower, but I do not see anything that makes him 100% attached. If he were to lose his footing right now, I believe he would fall all the way down to those guy wires. And if those guy wires weren't there, he could slip, down until the next obstacle were to stop him. So I think this is a free climbing incident. Here's another one. I think if we were to zoom in on this one, you would see a leather lineman's belt. And then here's another guy. He's standing on top of his Roan 25 tower at 80 feet or so. And he's got those two little bungee cords around the mast. And that's me. That's me some years ago. Okay. So this business of 100% attach really requires two things. One is you have to have the equipment to always be attached and properly attached, and you have to do it right. You have to use it correctly. 100% attach isn't possible without the right equipment. And if you think about climbing, when you climb, you're going to run into different obstacles. You need to climb around those obstacles. If you're always going to be attached, there are going to be times where you need to unattach something and move your attachment to another place. And you do that with this thing called the dual fall arrest lanyard. Okay. Okay. I think we get into the show and tell part now here. Yeah, let's do that. I am going to stop sharing. And I'm going to switch over to my other studio or my other camera. Are you seeing me okay? Is that working?
We
Yes.
see you just fine.
Okay, good. All right. I'm going to show you some climbing gear. The first climbing gear I will show you is this thing right here. This looks familiar. This is a lineman's belt. I don't know how old this one is. I think it's probably 80 years old. It's probably from the 40s or 50s. It's made of leather. It just goes around your waist. It's got a belt buckle in the front, and it's got two D-rings on the sides. It's got some places to put tools, and it has this lanyard, which is adjustable, and the lanyard goes around whatever you're climbing, a telephone pole or something else, or a tower, and you slide up and down with this thing. This was the standard for probably 100 years. I did some research on this. I wish I had the website, but I found a company on the web that was building this type of climbing gear for pole climbing all the way back into the late 1800s. Okay, so this design is 130 years old or something like that. Okay, and it was outlawed for tower climbing, I think in the sometime before 2000. I'm not sure exactly when it was. Maybe somebody here knows. It is interesting to note, though, that this is still permitted in some types of climbing. Telephone poles can be climbed using this, although the best practices steer climbers away from using this kind of gear, and they steer them much towards using bucket trucks and other means of getting the job done. Okay, so we get rid of this thing. This is the belt that I was using in the picture where I was standing up top of my tower. It's another waist belt. It doesn't have any shoulder stuff or anything, but it has these additional leg straps that go around your thighs. And those were invented to eliminate a type of incident that had happened quite, not infrequently, where a climber would fall and they would actually slip out of the waist belt and fall and free fall out of the belt. So that the leg straps prevent that. Now, when I was using this belt, I had introduced my own form of 100% attach. It was this dual lanyard that was attached at my belly button here. And I would alternately move this up the tower a couple of rungs at a time and always be attached. So this is my own form of 100% attach. Before I even kind of understood the rule, it was sort of intuitive to me that you'd want to do this. This kind of gear was actually approved for some period of time until further research showed that there were a lot of risks around this. Predominantly that if you fell and you were stopped, your fall was stopped, arrested by a static rope like this, the likelihood that you would hurt something in your body was pretty high. And also having it attached at your waist would mean that you'd fall and your back would be put under some pretty severe stresses. This is a positioning lanyard. I had a couple of different positioning lanyards of different lengths to go around the tower between the D-rings on the belt for different size towers. This one was for a larger tower, 45 or 55 guide tower. Okay, so this thing also became unacceptable in the commercial world. And what I've got now is a full-blown commercial full body harness and the proper lanyards. So the full body harness starts with a belt. The belt goes around your waist and you snug it up with the belt. But the real safety features of this thing are this harness here that goes over your shoulders, down around your legs. These things attach. They usually have that leg thing. And and if you fall, you're attached up top here. This is attached behind your neck when this thing is on, and you have an attachment mechanism to the tower. You also have the positioning lanyard. So we still have the D-rings. The D-rings have survived time. And this positioning lanyard is an adjustable one. This one I can, while I'm on the tower, I can pull it in to be up closer, tight up to the tower, or if I need to be back further to reach something, I can loosen this thing up. Okay. All right. Now, by the way, I know of people have told me that they climb the tower and they're using safe gear and they're climbing in that full body harness. Well, they don't understand that if you're not attached and the positioning lanyard doesn't give you a real guaranteed attachment if it's going around the outside of the tower. The only way you can be properly attached is to use something like this. And by the way, this is not the only way, but this is probably the most common type of 100% attach mechanism that's in use in the ham radio community. This hook here goes to that D-ring at the top back behind your neck. And then these two big gorilla hooks are what you use as you climb and maneuver up and down and around the tower. The OSHA spec says that this should be connected to a point on the structure that can withstand a downward force of 5,000 pounds, 3,500 to 5,000 pounds. If you do some math and you use your weight and 9.8 meters per second, and all those numbers. It turns out that the potential is there if you fall 6 or 10 feet using one of these lanyards. If you felt the maximum that this thing could extend, you could generate a force in that range on the tower. So actually on a guide tower, on a roan tower, which is what I'm most comfortable and knowledgeable about, the truth is that you really should be clamping this thing onto a leg of the tower. Around a leg at the weld is probably stronger than hooking onto the center of a rung. Okay. All right. So as you go up the tower, clip on here, go up a couple more rungs, clip on up here, undo this one down here, and alternately go up the tower with this gear, always with something always attached. It gets a little tricky when you when you're trying to go around a ring rotor or some other large obstacle on your path, but it can be done. And I will tell you, when I started using this stuff, I felt it was very cumbersome. It slowed me down. I still absolutely can't go as fast up and down the tower as I can without this stuff, but I feel completely exposed. I mean, I haven't climbed without proper gear for a long time now. I feel, you feel naked without it once you've gotten used to it and understand what it's doing for you. Okay, let's switch back to here. Hope you were able to see all that stuff. All right, now we'll go back to sharing.
How much does a full set cost?
They vary. You can get yourself set up for a few $100 all the way up to whatever you want to spend. I bought mine used from a friend. There's a whole discussion about used. We can talk about that. In the commercial world, there's a mandatory equipment retirement thing based on age. I think it's 5 years. So no matter what it looks like, no matter what, you retire it after 5 years. That comes up in conversations in the context of our ham radio world. And my view on that is that we don't necessarily have to adopt a standard like that. There are, most of us would keep our gear as I do. It's inside, it's well protected, it doesn't get used, even though I use it a relatively large amount of time. I am not a professional tower climber. It sits most of the time. And I believe that if inspected properly, that it can continue to be used for as long as it is up to snuff in terms of its mechanical construction. Some will argue with me on that, but I can tell you about other places, other types of activities where equipment is recertified. It is inspected and recertified indefinitely, as long as it's on some frequent basis it's looked at, and there is no mandatory retirement requirement. Okay, let me.
Jim, do most of the fellows that purchase that equipment go to a specialty place as opposed to Lowe's or Home Depot?
Yes. I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes. Actually, I'm gonna show you where you can get some stuff, and there are companies that specialize in fall arrest gear, and they do nothing but, and they're not small companies. There are many, there are different applications. If you're a tower climber or a steel worker or a lately the people working on large wind turbines have special requirements for their fall protection gear. Okay, are we back on the share? Okay. All right, good.
Looking good.
Okay, so we talked about the two big ones. We talked about unsafely guide guide towers that aren't guide right, and we talked about personal protection equipment. Now, the third category is this one. This one's much more amorphous and harder to describe, but basically this idea of unsafe maneuvers. They come in all flares. I'm going to show you two examples. It's not pretty. This is a case where several people were putting up an antenna support structure. Don't know exactly what it was, but it had a base next to the house, and they were tilting the thing up. There was somebody on the roof who was going to catch the thing and pull it in, and there were two other people on the ground, at least two other people, trying to tip it upward. Well, guess what? The thing gets out of hand. It falls in a direction it wasn't supposed to fall, and it hits power lines, and three people who were in contact with the tower lost their lives. So what you can imagine that these kinds of things aren't usually one small thing that causes the problem. There are a lot of things going on here. I mean, the thing was too heavy for them; they couldn't control it. The thing should probably have not been going up so close to the power lines in the first place. Who knows what else was at play here? So, perfect storm kind of things happen. A second one, this is in your area in the Pacific Northwest. This guy's name is on the list I showed earlier. I forgot his call sign, but this was a takedown of a large 40-meter antenna off a 100-foot guide tower. One person on the tower and some ground crew. The stories that I've read, although kind of sketchy in terms of data, seem to indicate that there was probably not a big enough crew, not an experienced enough crew, and not a well-equipped crew doing this job. And what happens? Something happens up top. The antenna was out. The guy at the top and the team lost control of the antenna, and it fell. It broke through an upper guy wire, and the tension of the other guy wires pulled the tower over. It collapsed, and the climber lost his life. So what are the common things here? We just have to way overestimate the resources that we need, and really try to bias things in our favor from all perspectives. The knowledge of the people, the tools, the time available, all of those things, contribute to this kind of stuff. And if we work hard to bias them in our favor, we will probably have better success in reducing the frequency of occurrence of these kinds of things. You can imagine situations where this kind of stuff happens. Maybe it's getting late and it's starting to rain, and two people on your crew have already left for the day, and there's a decision to be made. Do we finish the job? Do we do one last thing, or do we just say, hey, it's time to quit? We can get this done tomorrow or next week, and sorry, we won't have this antenna for the contest this weekend. Those are all acceptable things to do. Okay. All right. Here, I want to play an interview that I did with a fellow named Dennis. Dennis, KL7HRO, had an experience that he reached out. I had given this presentation on what it's called, Ham Nation, on Ham Nation with Bob Heil and Val and all those people. And here's what this guy Dennis had to say. Hey, Dennis, how long have you been a ham? And tell us a little bit about how you got started in tower climbing.
Hi, Jim. I'm glad to join you tonight. I've been an active ham since 1966. Long time ago. I'm 70 years old. I started climbing towers when I was 16 years old.
Tell me about how you learned to climb and how you gained knowledge about how to work on towers.
I learned the same way as many others my age. As a kid, I made it up as I went along. I was invincible. Looking back on those days, I can't believe some of the things I did. I just bought the towers and put them up. I had no help. I suggest you get an Elmer, somebody that knows how to do it. Somebody like yourself that can tell you the right things to do and the wrong things to do. I just winged it, and I was lucky up until 2012.
Tell us what happened in 2012.
Oh, Lord. Well, in 2012, I was taking down a 50-foot guide tower. I was working alone. I didn't tell my girlfriend I was outside. I was belted in at 30 feet. I had it down to 30 feet, and it was guide at 30 feet. And the tower guys were still attached. It had been a long day. I had done this job many times before, and I knew what I needed to do next. I should have put guy ropes at 20 foot, but I didn't. I made a bad choice, a choice that changed my life forever. I decided to trust the base to hold the tower up while I completed the job. While on the tower, I removed one of the remaining 3 guy wires, setting off a devastating chain of events. The tower came crashing down with me on it. It happened that quick. I ended up with a blown shoulder. The right elbow was gone, broken ribs, pelvis, and hip. I'm permanently disabled as a result of that one tiny decision. I was lucky though. Had I been on a different side of the tower, I would have been crushed and would not be here to talk to you today. I hit a 4-foot diameter tree trunk.
You've had years of experience and you've done this job before. Was there something that you missed, something you should have done?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah. I lived by always guying the tower. I should have put ropes on it at 20 feet. Okay. And then when I dropped 10 foot down, I should have dropped down another set of guys and guided at 10 feet. I broke my own rule and it almost killed me.
Tell us a little bit about what you learned. What were the key lessons from that experience? And how can our listeners here avoid learning these lessons the same hard way that you did?
Well, have a good safety harness on. Get help. Tell people that you're going up. Don't do it yourself. I was macho. I knew how to do it. I've been doing it for 45 years. Get help. Admit you can't do it by yourself. And then do it right. Do it safely. And live to tell somebody else how to do it correctly.
Thanks, Dennis. It's been great having you with us.
Thanks.
Okay. So, Dennis's story is unfortunately one that, he's not the only one to tell this story. My good friend Crossy K1LZ was on a D expedition in the Maritimes in Canada. I met him at the local airport. A friend of ours flew him back after he was med-flighted off the island with a badly broken leg. And in that case, it was a rope guide tower that came down while he was up there working on a rotator or a Yagi or something. And it was only 30 feet, and but it was pretty devastating, and many others. So the question is, what can we do to prevent this stuff? Let me talk about that. By the way, I'm looking at time. Let me make sure that it's okay to finish up. I think I have 15 more minutes, 10 to 15.
You're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the first thing is, what can we do as individuals? I'm talking to you. If you've heard the message here, if there's something you've heard here, you can probably change. For me, here's what it looked like in 1997, and here's what it looked like a year ago. And actually, I've made some improvements even since this picture on the right. The first thing I did was I made the choice. I recognized the risk, which I really didn't see before. I just didn't know. And you'd think, my friends all said I was crazy, but I didn't understand how crazy I really was. and I decided to make the necessary changes. I did the upgrades to the equipment. I bought the full body harness, the dual fall arrest, the proper helmet. Actually, by the way, the helmet that I'm wearing in the picture there is not a good helmet. It was a telephone lineman's helmet, has no chin strap. And I leave that picture there even with that problem, because I accept that my progress in this area is going to continue. I'm sure that I'm not doing everything perfect right now, but I'm doing a whole lot better than I was a couple of years ago, and I hope to continue. This helmet here is a good one. So that helmet in the picture has been replaced. This one's got the proper stuff. Okay. What else? So there was some hard cost around that, around $500. But I also accepted what I call the soft costs, the additional time required to climb, the additional time in transition. I would also add to this that I get a little more fatigued, a little bit more quickly. I'm not in the best of shape. I need to get in better shape, but I know that it's going to take longer, and I may not be able to do all of the work that I would have taken on in a day or in one project. But I accept all that stuff, and I think that the trade-off is well worth it. At the community level, we also need to do some work. We need to get this message out, and we need to eliminate the barriers that others may have to climbing more safely. There are many challenges. There are hams throughout the world who face this. Some are members of clubs, some are not. Some have means to be able to buy the gear, and some don't. Some we can get to, through social media or whatever. Some we can't. These are all things that we need to think about. But there's a big communication and education challenge. We have to deal with members of our community who are at different stages of this thing. I would say there's some who are simply unaware, as I was years ago. I have a good friend who came over. I asked for some tower climbing help. He climbed, and he came up and was with me at 80 or 90 feet, and we were working on something. And I noticed that he did not have equipment on that was going to do the job. And there were points during the climb where he unclipped, maneuvered himself to another position in a free climbing state, and then reattached. I didn't say anything to him while we were up on the tower. When we got to the ground, I mentioned all this. I talked to him through it. He said, "Oh, I have that stuff. I just haven't been bringing it with me on jobs. I guess it's easy for me to use." So the transition from him to unaware to kind of fully enabled was pretty easy. We have others who are kind of aware, but either don't care that much, and we need to figure out how to get them motivated to take action. And then there are others who are yet more averse to taking action, and these are the people who say, what I do in my own backyard is none of your business, and you shouldn't care. Well, we need to care, and we need to get them on the bandwagon as well, because we're a community, and what any member of our community does, and what happens to them, the stories that get told, reflect on all of us. So I think we need to fix this for no matter what state we're in. And what do we need to do? We need to engage. We need to get the word out. We need to create awareness. Once we have people's attention, we need to educate them. We need to let people know what needs to be done and how they need to, change their behavior, or what they need to do to improve. And then finally, enabling. You asked the question about where do you buy this stuff? Do you get it at Lowe's or somewhere else? Well, it's not particularly available in our community, and that's a problem we need to solve. And there are many other problems like it. Training is another one that is not readily accessible, and I think we need to do something formally structured and make it readily available. We're kind of working on that too. To do this, after talking about this with many friends and hearing from audiences like you, we decided to put together a team, and we gave it a name called the Zero Falls Alliance. And the idea is we're interested in safety. This first mission that we have is to address this issue of climbing safety. The alliance is amongst these three major stakeholders: the individuals, the people in our community who need help, the membership organizations, clubs, groups like yours, and industry. Our vendors can all contribute in ways to help further this goal. And again, this first mission being to deal with this radio tower climbing problem. We built a website. You can go to it now. It's called zerofalls.org. Encourage you to click the button at the top that says "Take the Pledge." Basically, you become a member. You become a member. You give us your email address. We agree not to send you too much, but a little bit. We pay money to keep the website going, and we're trying to do other things. So there's an opportunity to make a donation if you like as well. Here's what it looks like. There's the pledge. We're going to improve this. This is just sort of getting off the ground now. Once you get inside, you'll get access to different types of resources. Note that one of the resources here is climbing gear. What we've done is worked with a company called GME Supply. GME Supply is one of the largest fall protection equipment suppliers in the world. They have a huge presence. They're based in the US, but they have presence around the world. And we put together a couple of packages. One is what we call a budget entry-level climbing kit, which is not very expensive at all. When I spoke to the people at this company, I told them that, if a ham is going to put up an antenna, it's probably going to be a $200 antenna or a $500 antenna. Or if they're going to put up a new rotator for the antenna, it's probably going to be a $500 rotator. What I'd like to do is give them an option of buying a climbing gear setup that will come in at or under the cost of any one of those projects that they're likely to do on the tower. So that just in comparison, could you spend $350 before you spent that next 500 on the rotator? That was the goal here. So there's that one, and there's also a premium climbing kit. And we're talking about, putting together more options and doing deals with other suppliers to get other things to help keep this pursuit safe. Here are pictures of both of those climbing kits. The other thing that we did was put together a kind of a board of advisors for this organization. You may or may not recognize some of the names on the list here. Amongst this group, we have people who are in the tower building and management business, both amateur and commercial. We've got people who are responsible for huge safety programs in their work, in their occupations. One of these people works for a very large international transportation company, and they do billion-dollar projects. And as part of that, he is responsible for putting together safety-related programs, creating the culture of safety in his workplace. And that's a kind of skill and a kind of environment that we would like to see grow more in our world. Okay, and there are other kinds of backgrounds here that are relevant. We have been doing this presentation for lots of clubs. This is probably only half. I haven't had a chance to update this, but there are a bunch more clubs and organizations that have gotten on board in one way or another. What we really need is help in getting this word out. One of the things that I'm doing is working on a version of this presentation that any of you could give. So if you guys are members of other clubs and you could do a half-hour version of this presentation, we'd love to see that happen. We kind of need evangelists on this. And then there's all these clubs have also made some little bit of a financial donation. That's it. So, summary. I hope you've heard tonight that the risks of tower work are awfully high, and it seems to be a problem that's not getting better, and we need to do something. The good news is that so many of the problems that we've seen that have caused these major, fatal fatalities are things that we can solve, and that they fall into these two buckets: this unsafe towers and free climbing. If we solve both of those, again, 85% of the problems go away. Climb a safe tower, 100% attached, and then we need to marshal our resources and work hard to get this message out to our whole community if we're going to have the impact that we'd like to have. So that's it. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I'd love to talk about it more with you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. I find it amusing. I posted the link to GME in the chat before you mentioned you were partnering with them.
There you go. Okay.
Thank
I
you,
have-
Jim. That was really shocking again for the second time.
Yes.
Jim, that
I'm
was,
glad you're doing the job that we need to do, getting it out to more audiences.
yeah, the real life information and the demonstration of the gear was much appreciated. When I was doing the tower climbing in the 70s, I had my good old fashioned lineman's belt, and that's what I just used recently to crawl up a 30-footer to check on something for somebody. It felt perfectly comfortable with it, but not realizing that the rules had changed. So thanks for educating us and being here with us. That was a real eye opener.
What was your website again?
Zerofalls.org.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to, this is Roland, listening to your presentation and remembering some of the stupid things I did as a youth, climbing towers, climbing very large Douglas firs, putting up CB antennas prior to nothing, not even a bungee cord, going up a 90-foot tower or 90-foot tree, pulling up the coax, pulling up the antenna, strapping it on and coming back down. That could have been, that was when I was probably about 25, which is a few years ago.
Tom, I feel comfortable too in my other stuff. But the thing that happens is not the thing that's in your control. That's the thing, okay? You're up there and you've got this antenna in your hand and you get stung by a wasp. Okay, and you could lose your footing. I hate to say it, one of the incidents that was a fatality, one of the recent ones, not the very recent ones, but one of the ones last year, one that I learned about later, brings up a new category possibly, okay? And it appeared that the climber, he was an older guy, may have had a heart attack or stroke or something while on the tower. So now imagine you're losing consciousness, and your footing is not something that you can count on at all. So he fell. It was fatal. It not clear whether had somebody arrived. Now there was nobody there. He was working alone. He had nobody to call. So it was a bad sequence of events, and none of the best practices that could have saved his life were in place. He was working alone. He didn't have a helper. There are a bunch of things going on. But anyways, so the gear can help a lot. By the way, everything there's pros and cons to everything. One of the arguments against the gear, which I find, for me, it's hard to accept it. But one of the arguments is if you fall, the constriction of the harness around you can stop blood flow, can cause other internal organ problems, things like that. And some have actually argued that they're happy with their old gear because those things probably aren't going to happen. But there's reasons that the professionals have. Yeah.
You also have to look at,
Go ahead, Ralph.
they may constrict you for a little bit of time, but they keep you from going splat on the ground. And
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
much rather be with the modern climbing equipment, because the attachments are in between your shoulder blades. When you do fall, it keeps you in an upright position, and it allows you to survive coming to the end of the fall at your at those collapsed because they're sewn and they're made to pop apart
Right. I
and
did
take
mention that. I
some
forgot
of the
to mention
tension.
that.
So
Right. I did forget to mention that.
Yeah.
Inside this thing here. Now this bungee thing has nothing to do with safety. That's just makes it more convenient. It collapses down to a few feet. But when it's fully extended inside, as you said, there's a sewing inside that is intended to tear at a rate that will slow you down. It'll make the deceleration more acceptable to your body, and you come to a stop with less of a shock than, for example, than that other rope that I had in the earlier harness. So yeah, I mean, there are people a lot smarter than me who have been thinking about this and doing the experiments for a long time, and I'm going with their judgment. I'm good with it.
There is a lot of science behind fall protection, and yeah, what cost is your life worth?
Yep.
But Jim, there's a website that sells all sorts of stuff for towers and lightning arrestor and that kind of stuff. And his call is very similar to you. That is not you, is it? You don't have a side business where you sell tower accessories?
No. No. Who are you thinking of?
It's K1. I thought it was CR or something like that. Metalworks Products or something similar to that name. But he's advertised on the QST website or the ARRL website, and he has lots of nice stuff for working on towers and ropes and beaners and pulleys and stuff. His call is very similar to yours, and I wondered if that was you, because I think
if you find it, you shoot me an email with it if you can find it.
Sure.
Jim, Robin G3 TKF.
Yeah,
just
hi,
to
Robin.
say hi. Just to say thanks very much indeed. Absolutely fascinating talk. We've given up one aspect of towers. I'm part of a contest group in the UK, and we just have a rule that says don't climb towers. We use the Versa Tower on trailers like the one behind me, which is not very easy to see.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
But we've never had any really serious accidents. We've had one very, very near miss when we had one of those towers up at 100 feet. The top triangular section of a 100-foot Versa tower is about a 3-inch section, 3-inch triangular section. And we had an optibeam like that, an 11-element one on the top of it on Bear Island, which is southern Ireland. And a hurricane hit us completely out of the blue. It was almost unheard of. And the top section snapped at the point where it joined the rest of the tower because it was so thin. The whole thing bent over, and the top section, about 60 feet of it, shot out of the top of the tower and went about 300 feet across in the direction where the operating section was, narrowly missed a car, and where three chaps were actually watching the hurricane. It landed within about 2 or 3 feet of them, and it could have killed all three of them.
Yeah,
it was. We were just so lucky, and we never used a tower with that thin top section ever again. Mm-hmm. So all our towers are 80 feet as opposed to 100. So we've been very lucky.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Don't climb a tower.
So there was the lesson was you don't extend it up.
Well, the lesson was actually, to be honest, because we were on a very rocky island, we guide the very top section separately, which was a mistake. So the tower was guyed in 4 places, and the top section was guyed independently. And one of the guys pulled out. That was the problem in the hurricane, because we couldn't drive the stakes in far enough. But of course, prior to the hurricane, it was a bright sunny day. It literally came out of nowhere. And, you know, a bit like being stung by a wasp, isn't it? Unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it was a frightening occurrence. Anyway, thank you very much indeed.
Wow.
I'm going to go back to
Thank you
bed
for
now.
staying up so
Excuse me.
late for me.
Yeah, it's only 4:20 in the morning.
Good to see you,
Anyway,
Robert.
Very kind.
Yeah, I'll say good night to all of you. Actually, anyway, thanks
Good night,
for
Robin.
letting me in.
Get some sleep.
Okay, good night all.
Good night. Good night. Okay. Well,
I'm curious, Jim. What do you have, a tower, or do you have several towers that you're up and down all the time? And what you got on top of them?
okay. If you, let's see, I'm trying to see if hang on, let me see if I can find a picture quick. Give me a second. I can talk while I'm searching. I have a single tower at my house here. It's 80 feet of Roan 45. It started as a Roan 25 tower when I first got it permitted, and then I started putting too much stuff on it and took the whole thing down and replaced it with the 45. It's guyed in 3 places. The top set of guys is a star guy, if you're familiar with that. It's got, you know, two guy wires going down to each anchor. I did find some pictures here. Let me, let's see.
Well, I probably have the safest tower of all of us here. It's laying in sections in the back, on the back patio. 70 feet of Roan 25, and nobody's going to get hurt climbing it, but they will if they fall over it.
I was going to say it's a trip hazard.
Yes.
Let's see. Let's open this with preview. Should do it. All right, see my screen?
There you go.
There's my tower. And
wow.
So what's up there? First of all, let's see. This is me down below. This is my friend Marty, NN1C. He's a youngster. He's just he's a freshman at Northeastern University. Just started. What you see here is the star guy. Okay, it's a triangular bracket that allows you to have 2 points of attachment to the tower, and what you end up with is a very, very strong resistance to torque with this thing. And even with the 45 upgrade from 25, this big OptiBeam, this is a 40-meter OptiBeam 4-element, it was torquing the tower way too much. So I put that guy bracket on. That was a retrofit. At the time that I put it in, you couldn't buy one that was designed to be retrofitted. In other words, this bolts together at the corners. The one that Roan sells is welded to, it's a welded triangle, and you have to put it over the top of the tower. You gotta kind of install it at the beginning. So, and then there's a tick ring rotor turning that right there at the bracket. So all of the torque is absorbed by these guy wires from this antenna here. And then I have a 24-foot mast that goes from the rotator someplace down here up to, oh, actually, I see a rotor plate hanging here. So this was in the middle of a job. The rotator was removed. The rotor plate is hanging here on the outside of the tower. And we were actually working on this 20-meter antenna up here was the goal. this is a job that we just did about 3 weeks ago. It was a hair-raising job. This is a 204BA. It's a 26-foot boom, and the elements are connected, electrically connected to the boom at the center, if you know the high gain construction at all. And the effect of that for this 20-meter antenna was that along the boom dimension of this, it was like a loaded element, and it was resonant and in the 40-meter band. So what happened was, when this boom was parallel to the elements of this 40-meter antenna, it was screwing up the 40-meter antenna pretty badly. SWR was going crazy. I'm sure the pattern was terrible. I have amplifiers that have protection circuits, so the SWR was high. The amplifiers were tripping all the time. So if I had two operators in a contest, one on 40 and one on 20, and the 20-meter guy is fooling around with his antenna, he could take the 40-meter guy off the air. So that was unacceptable. So what we did was, we went up here, and with a lot of effort, we manhandled this 20-meter antenna so that we could replace this boom to mass, I'm sorry, element to boom support, boom to element support here and out here on this end with insulating hardware, and it worked. It worked. The thing no longer resonates in 40, and in fact, by the way, we used modeling. The model for a 204BA is readily available, and so we used EasyNeck, and we tried just insulating one or two of these elements, and it didn't move the resonance completely out of the ham bands. The only way to get it as far out as we needed was to do all three. So we did all three. And that was a job that was designed to take 2 days, but it took like 7. We ran into other problems along the way. And then down below, here's some other antennas. This is a tri-bander fixed, aimed south. Here's a 10-meter Yagi right next to it, which is going to go. That's going to come off the tower. This rotor side mount here is turning another 20-meter Yagi and a 6-meter beam. And then down below, there's another 15-meter Yagi. So it's a stack arrangement. We've got, go ahead.
Any idea what the wind load on all that is?
I calculated it. We have a friend who works for a civil engineering company. He did the initial designs for the tower when it was Roan 25. I went, and he did proper PE signed, sealed stuff because the town required it. You know, I needed all that. And then I've gone back to him with these upgrades and just waved them under his nose. And he looked at it and said, yeah, I think you're fine.
Okay. Wow.
So, and I mean, I trust him. I trust him. And I got his advice when I did the Star Guy.
Excellent.
You know, the what's in the manual, I guess it's just a starting point. You know, the Roan catalog, the standard designs, they're really just a starting point. And every installation has to be looked at individually. I would tell you that how many of you are Facebook users or any other social media?
I think most of us.
So I've been, for a couple of years now, I've been a member of a couple of the newcomer type Facebook groups. And I just watch and I listen and I try to offer some Elmering kinds of comments when the right kind of questions come up. I would say once a month or so, somebody posts a photo of a tower. And it's usually an old TV receiving tower or something at somebody's house. And the post says something like, I met this guy in town, or I knocked on his door. I was wondering if he still used the tower, and the guy said, "No, I don't use it. I haven't used it for years. But if you'd like it, just come and take it down and take it away, and go. You can go put it up." And people ask questions about that, and they're usually 30 or 40-foot towers. They're sometimes house bracketed, and sometimes they're freestanding aluminum towers, and it's amazing how many people are ready and willing to and think it's an easy job, and aren't too concerned and have none of the necessary knowledge to do it safely. And that's the kind of thing that what I'd like Zero Falls to do, this organization, is to have enough of a voice so that somewhere along the way, especially people like this who have social media and are thinking about posting the question, it would be great if they were to see some advertising or some push and get the message before they go out and do it. I'm sure that for every one that gets posted, should I do this, there are probably one or two others who don't bother to post that message and go out and do it and potentially get themselves in trouble. So.
Quite a setup.
This is Ryan. I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. Is really good, great data collection. I'll certainly post your website. We've got a little Slack channel at work of amateur radio hams, and I'll post the link there. One of the things I didn't see mentioned, and I think it's a good reminder, is you can get seriously injured from 5 feet. I see a lot of people who sort of give up when they think they're close enough to the ground, and I always try to remind people, until your foot is firmly planted, you are still climbing.
This is very true. I have a slide that let me see if I can find it. So this presentation has morphed over many presentations, and let me see if it's still in here somewhere. One of the pieces of research that I did, here it is. Okay, let's see, unhide this. And okay, mortality versus height of fall. So this is slightly related to what you were mentioning. In New York City, somebody did a survey of some number of hundreds of emergency room admissions where the injury was caused by a fall. And they were able to ask the question, how high did you fall from? How high did they fall from? And so here's some data. Mortality in overall patients. So right here. So you're at 20% of chance of losing your life, at least according to this, at 3.5 stories. There's another chart. There's another slide I have. I won't dig it out, but the types of injuries that occur in emergency rooms, they have this scale called the ISS scale. It's Injury Severity Scale. And what happens is when somebody comes into the ER with multiple injuries, each of the injuries that they have has a certain number of points associated with it. So if you have internal injuries, you've got some points. You got some broken bones. For each broken bone, you get some points. And they use this over the years to build a database. And so there's another set of data here showing the ISS. So that tells us more about injuries, not just fatalities. But it's absolutely, completely true. And that one slide that I showed you earlier, the guy fell with the tower from about 10 feet and he lost his life. So you're absolutely right. That 100% attach starts from the moment you set foot on the first rung of the tower. That's the way I try to communicate that point.
Wow. Wow.
The rule I was taught is you are attached before your feet leave the ground.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
I'm
Yep.
I'm recently retired from a multinational engineering construction company, and when you go to one of the job sites at that time, I shouldn't say our job sites because I'm no longer with them. I'm retired, but when you were given personal protective equipment, which included a climbing harness, if you went through the you went through the gate to go onto the active construction site, you had to have your harness on. And once your feet left the dirt, you had 100% fall protection was required.
Yep.
And if you were caught not doing that on the job site, you were subject to removal and dismissal. And so the company I worked for was, they were serious about this. And yeah, that's why my comment about the gear and how it's there, you know, even though I was on the engineering side where I never was going to put my rear end where I needed to tie off,
Right.
you know, everybody had fall protection.
Yep. Yep. And the rest of it, I'm sure if you went on site, you had your hard hat properly done and things like that.
You wore a vest, you wore gloves, you wore hard hat, you had all the
Yeah.
PPE, and if you weren't wearing it, you were escorted off the site.
So I told you I was thinking about training. So this company, GME Supply, and a number of others offer commercially oriented training for climbing, for tower climbing. And I have had some discussions with them. They would love to come up with something for the amateur radio community. I think that we have an opportunity to train different categories of us. So there are we as a group aren't a homogeneous group. There are those of us who don't do any climbing at all, aren't ever near a tower, and probably don't need this. There are those who are tower owners who don't climb themselves, but take advantage of either paid services or friendly hams who will help them out. There are those who do the climbing, both for pay and not. And then there are ground crew, people who help out with projects. And I'm thinking that there are several different courses or curricula that we could develop for all of those different categories and what they should be thinking about, the checklists that they should go through, and all of those different things. And for those who actually do the work, there are certain types of work that we do that's common, very common. You know, replacing a rotator, and we could have a little course on replacing a rotator. We can have a course on tramming Yagis up and down. We can have courses on actually, you know, constructing tower construction and maintenance. There's a bunch of different things. The question is, how do we do that cost effectively for the community that we serve? People can't afford very much. I mean, many, when I put those numbers of $350 or $500 or $1,000 for a climbing kit, there are those of us who won't be able to see how that could fit in their budget. And we have to solve problems there. And I think we have to solve it in this training area as well. So an idea is we can do train the trainer kinds of stuff. And when we get back into the business of having hamfests, I think we can do on-site training, and we can train people in fairly large numbers and run them through, you know, half-day classes and that sort of thing. And we might be able to get funding for this. There are a couple of organizations that have already been talking to about funding the development of the curriculum, and also the potential for funding some number of people taking the class every year. So there's lots of opportunity.
It just
Here's
makes
that
me think
slide.
of all the things that when you're lifting, putting a tower up, all the things that need to go into that is, you know, proper base or foundation calculations, when you start putting the tower up, how do you do the rigging for your lifts, how to properly use jib poles. There's a whole mess of stuff that the amateur guy says, well, I'm just going to go out and throw a tower up. There's a lot that goes into this stuff.
Right. And part of that is there's this self-assessment thing, that there's a list, and as a first timer, you are not qualified to do it. You
No.
need help. You are not qualified if it's your first time. So, right, you can start there. By the way, I had the root causes, the three, the unsafe maneuvers, the other two? Unsafe guide tower and PPE. I think there's a fourth category emerging, which is climber not qualified. Basically, this is a person who probably shouldn't be on a tower at all.
Doesn't that qualify as unsafe maneuvers?
It could be, but
Because if they're not qualified to be up there, anything they do on the tower is unsafe.
right. No, that's true. That's true. I in thinking about it, it might be worthwhile thinking of it as its own thing. So many people are asking me the question, is there an age at which we should no longer be climbing? And that's a really tough question. That's a really tough one. If you look around at other pursuits like this, rock climbers, in the monthly magazine of the rock climbers, every 6 months, you'll see an article about the 102-year-old person who climbed XYZ and did it successfully and safely and all that. So I'm uncomfortable putting any hard numbers on it, but I think we ought to have ways of self-assessment. I think we ought to be able to look at each other or look at our own state and decide whether we're really the person who ought to be setting foot on the tower. And we might be able to build some standards around that.
Very good. Well, fabulous presentation, Jim,
Okay.
and I really appreciate you staying up late with us and taking on the extra questions and showing us a few extra things there. With that, boy, it really got me thinking about days gone by. I was on top of an old aircraft beacon tower. I had my good old-fashioned lineman's belt on, but there was a cage at the top where you could service what used to be the old light there. And like Robin told us about the hurricane that came out of nowhere, a snowstorm and windstorm came out of nowhere and literally skidded me across the approximate 15-foot catwalk, enclosed catwalk that was up there. And I finally was able to get my lanyard attached to something, but I had to ride that miserable thing out for about a half hour face down into the grate on top of that.
Wow.
Oh, it was not pleasant. And lightning, of course, was striking all around me. So it was not a pleasant experience.
No, sounds awful.
Well, again, thank
Okay.
you so much. This was fabulous. I was really looking forward to this, and Robin did a good job of getting you to come and do this for us. This was really good.
Thank you
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Would love to have you guys. Would love to have you guys as a supporting member or something of the alliance. That would be cool.
What is the definition of a supporting member?
Well, it's pretty loose, Maybe
Okay.
you can put our logo up on your website. Do you have a website?
Yes, sir.
You could make a little donation, whatever is comfortable. We would love to have somebody who would feel comfortable maybe making this presentation.
Okay.
Some version of it. We need help on things like putting together content for that website. When you go into the website, you'll see that I did the work on the climbing gear, but there's so much more that needs to be in there, a ton more. And I can't even, I can make a list, but you could add to the list. it would be great to have some help putting things together. So,
Okay.
you know, we need people to join the team.
Okay. I got those jotted down, sir.
Think about it. Yeah, think about it. Talk to your crew and see what you think.
Okay.
Thank you all again. It's
Good job,
great
sir.
talking to you.
Oh, before you go, Jim, okay, are you comfortable with your email so I can send you that product information that you're interested from that
Sure.
guy with the calls? Go ahead.
Jim@k1ir.com.
Okay.
Makes life nice and easy.
That's an easy one, isn't it?
Got it. All righty. Thanks again.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Thank
See ya.
you.
7-3.
Thank you. Center 3.
Good night.
Robin, you done good. That was great.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, he's great at making the person look good, isn't he?
Yeah, that was a real eye opener. Yeah, no kidding. And I've
Hey, look, you
actually
can see the towers I care about.
I had to go rescue a guy on a tower once in my fire department days, and we were lucky because the crew that was working on the project was there, and they already had a certified man lift there, and all they had to do is disconnect their lift apparatus over to the man lift, and it was real easy to go over there and get my two guys on, move the patient on the backboard onto the man lift and haul him down. If we had to have done that the way that I was horribly thinking we were going to, I'd still be there bringing him down. But yeah, he had a heart attack up there.
Oh, that's no fun.
No, fortunately, no CPR was needed or anything like that, because that would have complicated things totally. But yeah, we got him down in about 15 minutes, I think, and just walked him right off the man lift right into the medic unit, gone.
He survived
Yeah.
the.
He did. He went back to work for the company in about a year.
Wow.
And for the record, anybody that says climbing gear constricts when you fall has no clue what they're talking about. If your climbing gear is properly fit, it won't. I have literally gone to sleep hanging from a rock in my gear.
Yeah, that's good gear.
Well, I fear those are the same people who complain about seatbelts.
Actually, you know what? Let them complain. They can become the statistic that I'll be talking about 20 years later.
No kidding.
There's a point at which I say, let Darwin take his due.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, where would we be without real world examples?
Exactly. Somebody has to set the example.
Just let it be the other guy.
Right.
Just let them be this is how you don't do it example.
So, Robin, I haven't heard you on Washington 1, Washington 2, Local 1, Local 2. Do you even turn your DMR on?
I haven't a lot lately, and I need to play around with my code plug. No, I haven't. This year has just been unreal for me, just unreal. Even when I'm having it on, I'm so distracted monitoring. Yeah. I'm in Port Townsend right now, and I monitor the Jefferson County fire because of my son-in-law. And
No, that's cool. That's cool. Now, was your Port Townsend place kind of like a retreat for you, or are you actually fixing it up to possibly move to?
It's pretty much turnkey. We just bought it and started putting stuff in it. I mean, it's pretty much a second home right now. We're just dividing our time, and I think my husband is getting pretty sold on it. If we put some money into fixing up the basement, the idea is a unit for a caregiver to reside in someday for one or two of us, and it's just 2.5 blocks from our daughter. So
there you go. Is it downtown Port Townsend, or?
We're on the bluff, so we're at Pierce and Jefferson. So we're one block off the bluff, but yes, we do have water view.
Yep. I know Port Townsend from spending many, many, many weekends there for bike rides and stuff. So yeah, you got a nice spot there.
It's very nice. I mean, we don't ever really get in our car. You walk everywhere. I mean, we're one block from the post office, and we can walk down to the co-op for food, and downtown, and just down to the beach.
Ooh, there you go.
Yeah.
Not bad. Not bad at all, you guys. Well, that was great, and I enjoyed that and learned some stuff. So you guys have a most pleasant evening. I got to go look up something for Jim because I can't remember that other guy's call sign. And that other place is where I bought all the rope for my wire antennas, the pulleys, and some other miscellaneous antenna stuff, and pretty decent prices with pretty quality stuff. So go find that for Jim, so he'll have that available for him.
There you go. And oh, hey, if you find that you need some wire rope, let me know. I seem to have more than I thought I did.
10-4. Okay, you guys, have a good one.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.